Good morning, everybody. My name is Gary Parker, for anybody who doesn't know me, and I'm the Managing Director of CNT Associates, who are bringing this program to you today, which is also supported by the Royal Borough of Greenwich, because we are delivering the Generative Business Program for them, which is a government-funded program of business support. If anybody's based in Greenwich or Bexley, you can get some free support from us. If you're in other places, then you need to look at your local authority website. What we're looking at this morning, and we've had a lot of registrations, is how to write a funding application. It's going to be about 40 minutes. For everybody who joins the presentation, you will get a summary copy of it. It's also on our a version, or several versions of it are on our YouTube channel, but this is the most updated one, and we will go through all the sort of basic elements of fundraising and bid writing. Of course, it's only up to an hour, so what you'll get over here is an overview of this. It will be recorded as well, so if you can keep yourselves on mute, please, if you're listening in. Like I said, you will get a copy of the summary slides, and it will be on the CNT YouTube channel in about 2 weeks' time. And the first thing I would like to do is to introduce my colleague, Sybil Mayard, who is CNT's digital lead, who's going to tell you about some forthcoming events and other initiatives she's involved in. So over to you, Sybil.
Thank you, Gary. So good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining today. My name is Sybil Mayard, and I've been working with CNT for the past few years on various different projects. I'm also one of the advisors for the business support programs. So I help with website reviews, digital marketing strategies, and getting your business online. Also, hosting many workshops as well, workshops and webinars in the digital space. So my background is website design. I design and build websites for small businesses. And so far, I've worked with businesses and organizations from a range of different industries, including well-being organizations, consultancies, tech businesses, artists and musicians, also e-commerce businesses, fashion brands, and many others. So if website design or development is something that you're looking to do, please get in contact with us because we can support you with that. And I will put the CNT contact information into the chat very shortly. We also have a YouTube channel which has many useful webinars. So we upload all of the webinar recordings onto there, including this one today, which will be on there as well. And they are free of charge to access. So I highly recommend having a look at our YouTube channel. And the other thing I wanted to mention is the next webinar in this series, which will be the Support for Women-Led Businesses webinar taking place on Thursday, the 30th of January. So if you would like to attend that, I will also put the details of that in the chat too. A very useful webinar if you are a women-led business, but of course everyone is welcome to attend. So we hope to see you on that webinar next year.
Okay. Full details of all of these events and initiatives are sent to people who are members of our mailing list So if you're if you're here today, you'll be on it. So look out for our regular emails, and of course, many of these presentations and initiatives are free. So we're going to move on to the main item now. For those that have just joined us, my name is Gary Parker, and I'm going to do a presentation now, which will last about 35 to 40 minutes, about all the main elements of writing a funding application. And then there will be time for questions. So I'm going to share this with you now. And again, as I said earlier, we will be sending a summary copy of the slides out. It's not every slide, but it's a summary of the main points after this event today to those who've joined us. So I'm going to share this now. Okay, let's get on with it. Hopefully everybody can see that. Yeah. Right. So I've gone through the domestics already. So we'll move on to the introduction. This is just briefly about CNT and myself. CNT as a company have been around for over 20 years. We do three things: business support, work around fundraising, and digital services, all of which have been illustrated by Sybil and myself in the last few minutes. We work for a wide range of organisations, including GLL, Peabody Trust, the Jimmy Choo Fashion Academy. We are Safe Supplier accredited, and we work for a range of other organisations, including Visit Greenwich, Birmingham Enterprise Community, and AIM Assessment. Our business and support partners include Greenwich University, South East London Chamber of Commerce, the London boroughs of Bexley and Greenwich, and United Technologies Limited, and we have offices here in London and in the northwest of England. And we work regularly for many organisations on funding and fundraising issues, including delivering funding courses, researching funding sources, and writing funding applications. So if you're interested in funding and funding applications, please contact us and we can give you a quote for our services. Just put a message in the chat. So here are all of our links. As I say, these will go out on the with the summary slide, but if you want to make a note of any of these, please do. Many of our presentations are on the CNT YouTube channel, so please like and subscribe that if you find it useful. And there's our Twitter and Instagram handles as well. Okay, today we're going to cover finding the right funding, submitting a quality application, equality, social impact, and other related issues, and bid writing workshop. So for anybody who's new to this, here are my top 5 bid writing tips. The first thing I would suggest is that you decide the direction of your project, business, or organization, which should usually come out of your business plan, and then look for funding to support your overall aims and direction, or the vision for your business, whichever you think is appropriate. But don't just chase money, because that can lead to many other issues, including mission drift. And if you're a non-profit making organization, there could be some potential legal or structural issues as well. So focus on where you want to be and look for the funding to support it. Research funders, the first part of this presentation will be where the money is, because there's two elements to fundraising. One is finding the right funders and funding, and the second is writing an application to address the priorities and requirements of those funders. Develop a project plan or outline. So you should look to develop a kind of a fundraising strategy. I'm trying to avoid using too much jargon here. And then you can focus on the development and delivery of funding applications. And the next point is to develop a model or outline application, which can be used in a number of applications, because there's 2 or 3 types of things you have to address here. Sometimes, for example, with the lottery, they send you or local authority tenders, they send you a set application form which you've got to fill in or address. There are others that ask you to provide a summary of your services, so you can use a model application for that. And then there are a range of other methods that you may have to use as well. But if you develop a model application, you can use some or most aspects of it on most application forms. The final point on this is be persistent. Bid writing is not rocket science, I can tell you that. I'm sure if I had the time and you had the time, I could teach all of you to do this to a high standard. But it does take persistence, and if you're new to this, then success rates are likely to be low. You can improve your success rate by studying presentations like this one and others. There's a lot of stuff online, but it does take some time, and the detail is important as well, as we shall see. And the final point is don't be a quitter. It's going to take time. So if you're going to get into this, you've got to recognize that it's a long-term project. And of course, by the law of averages, the more bids that you write, the more likely you're going to have some success in due course. Excuse me. Okay. So we'll start with types of funding. I've categorized these into 6 different sectors. There's grant making trusts and foundations. So that's charities of various types and other grant making bodies. Statutory funding, that's local authorities. European funding, because there is some European funding out there now, again from the European Union, particularly around tech. And then there's national and regional government, like the Greater London Authority and others who give out grants of various types. The third type is community fundraising, and that covers a number of areas. It can also cover things like crowdfunding and a number of other associated areas. Then there is company giving, which is more difficult to access for many organizations. You've got to be quite persistent with that. But there are many big businesses that have got their own charitable organizations, or they under corporate social responsibility, they will provide a range of other potential services, like their professional skills. For example, there's some pro bono law programs out there who will do legal work for free, or there's some accounting firms that will do sets of accounts, etc., etc. So private sector giving is not always in terms of cash. Sometimes it is, but often it's skills and other support. Finally, we've got what I would call social investment. These are kind of hybrid funding models. Sometimes they are grant funding with additional bonuses for achieving certain targets. Sometimes they are part loan, part grant funding. It tends to be on bigger projects for things like that, and in certain areas, as we shall see later. So those are the six main areas that you'll need to be looking in, depending, of course, what your project or business does. We'll start with the basics. What is a grant? A grant is a non-returnable funding package in exchange for a measurable impact. So what that means is they will give you a sum of money to deliver a project or certain outcomes. So if, for example, your well-being project, it might be running workshops in the community or working with individuals or groups that have had well-being issues of various types and providing support for them. It could be a social impact to support a community, or it could be empirical, i.e. research completed, jobs created, or safeguarded, or a new innovation. So that is a grant. It's non-returnable. It's non-repayable, basically, for anybody who doesn't know that. As opposed to the next one, which is a loan. And there are quite a lot of loan funding programs out there, particularly for non-profit making organizations. A loan is a sum of money payable at a set rate of interest. So you'll get £10,000 or whatever, but you'll have to pay interest on the top of that, whatever the current rates are. 5% plus at least at the moment. And then the other type of funding is crowdfunding, which is basically if you're in the non-profit making sector, a donation, or if you're in a profit-making business, an investment in your business, like on Dragon's Den. Crowdfunding is an interesting area. We'll mention a bit about that later. But again, with all of these, I would advise proceeding with caution and to do your research and shop around, particularly if you're looking at loans and crowdfunding. Okay, a bit more about grant making trusts and foundations. They've been around in the UK for thousands of years, literally. Specifically established to distribute funds to communities and good causes. There are a significant number of trusts in the UK. There are thousands and thousands of these. Basically, to access money for them, what you need to do must be classified as charitable activity and within the criteria of their trust deed. So what that means is they will have a setup document or constitution or articles of association, and then they can only fund projects within that particular area. It's called primary purpose. And so, for example, if they were set up to fund projects for older people, they can't fund environmental projects or construction projects unless older people are involved. So the focus is quite specific. So you need on most charities because they all have a trust deed. These vary from small grants to 500,000 plus grants and more than that in the case of some of the very big charitable funders. The next thing is a question that people are always asking me. How long does the assessment of applications take? That's a bit of a how long is a piece of string question. but it's between 3 months and a year. Yes, I haven't made a mistake on that, a year. Often the reason for this is because, particularly with charitable organizations or bigger funders that have boards, the boards have to ratify any grants awarded by the assessment staff. And if those boards only meet quarterly or every 6 months, or in some cases every year, you have to wait, and there's no going around that. The quickest I found is probably the lottery, if you're in the charitable section, but even they're saying about 16 weeks now, but sometimes it's less than that. And the other one is some local authority and regional programs can be quicker than that. It depends how quickly they need to distribute the money, because sometimes if there's delays, they want to do it very quickly. But it does, it varies significantly from organization to organization and from sector to sector. But if you want a rule of thumb, you've got to give it at least 3 months. Okay, like projects which make money go further by levering in other funds. So some charitable trusts will only fund 10%, 20%, 50% of your project. They like to see other funders supporting the development of an organization or project. Some larger trusts may be prepared to take risks and support hard to fund projects. There's a fund called the Edge Fund, which funds some projects that are unpopular in some sections of the public, and they will take risk on those. But there are a significant number of grant-making trusts out there. And here are two websites you can access this information through. They're not the only ones. Charity Excellence is a good place to start because it's free. My Funding Central is free to some people, but there is a paywall on that. But if you're a smaller organization, you can access it for free. It's based on a self-assessment of whether you're small or not. So it's down to you, depending on your size and focus. But Charity Excellence is probably the best of the two, and it's free. Okay. Who are the biggest charitable funders? There are a number of these, but one of the biggest is the one I'm going to mention later, which is the Wellcome Foundation, who give out 700 to 800 million pounds a year, and they're committed to giving away several billion pounds by 2030. So unusually as well for a charity, because most charities will not accept applications from individuals or companies, private companies limited by shares. In other words, profit-making companies. The Wellcome Foundation or Wellcome Trust will consider funding every type of organization or structure, providing you focus on their priority areas, which is around health research, and well-being, amongst others. There are some others, but you need to look at the website. I'll give the details of that later. How much do you think in total is given out every year by the top 500 charities in grant funding? It's if you include others that are estimated, is probably about 4 to 5 billion pounds a year. So that is a significant amount of money, and that is still there. There's more competition for it now, but that, even during the recession 10 years ago, there was that money was still there, because often, when these charities have been around for hundreds of years, they build up significant reserves and are still able to distribute funding. Statutory funding. This includes government funds, local and health authority grants, European funds. Grants are given to further the statutory funder's objective. So, for example, we run a business support program in Greenwich for non-profit making businesses. and we had to tender for that ourselves based on what we could provide to support those type of organizations. They're called generative businesses. And the application form focused around what we could deliver and what support we could provide. Because that's what were in the objectives for the tender, basically. They often provide larger and longer grants than trusts and are more likely to fund core costs. Because if you're a non-profit making organization, one of the biggest issues is that most charitable trust funders only want to fund projects. There's very few that will fund you for the organizational support and development of your organization. They want projects delivered. Local authorities want that as well, but they're also more likely to make a contribution to the core costs of running that, all your running costs, staff salaries, insurance, etc., premises in some cases. Whereas grants may not cover all of those costs, but it does depend. They are more bureaucratic and inflexible. In other words, that means they produce a specification and you've got to provide a response that addresses that specification. And if you don't or you can't do that, you're much less likely to get funded. So they focus on those particular areas. The application process may be complicated and drawn out with more than one stage, because sometimes they have, and I'm using funding jargon here, they have EOIs, expressions of interest, which is kind of like a mini tender, or they have PQQs, pre-qualification questionnaires, where you've got to address certain things about your organization, provide information like your track record, and whether you've got appropriate insurance and other infrastructure. All of these, fundraising is not an inclusive process. It's designed to exclude you. It's a bit like a job interview. If there's only one or a small number of vacancies at the end, if they get a lot of applications, there's got to be a process to sift through and sift out some potential applicants until you get down to the ones that get funded. So you need to keep that in mind. This is not an inclusive process. It's designed to exclude you. So anything that they put out there like this, you need to pay a lot of attention to, because some people think, oh, it's just a formal thing. And to get some basic details from you, which it is, but it's also to have an initial sift, so you may not get through that stage. They don't always make that clear. It's the same, even more so with a pre-qualification questionnaire, because they will ask you often for quite detailed information on that. So if anybody wants any further information and advice on that, you should contact us. There will be guidelines and support for applicants. Often what they're doing now is they're either having presentations via Zoom or online, or in some times in-person events where people can ask questions, and they have FAQ sections on frequently asked questions sections on the tender, where you can ask the funders to clarify certain questions or issues on the applications. They don't always do that in other areas. For example, like some charitable trusts won't do that, but generally speaking, statutory funders, local authorities, the health service and European funds and others do that. If you want more information about this, you should contact your local council or your NHS or individual care service, which is your local NHS services, for more information about that. Or you can look at any of these websites. Gov.uk, which is the government's website, have a lot of useful information about how to access funds from central and local government. Grants online, I can really recommend that. Again, there is a paywall on that, but there is some free access on it. And My Funding Central, I've already mentioned. Look at those if you want further information. Sorry, I'm going to go back slide that. The next is lottery funding. There are a number of strands to the lottery, a number of programs. The biggest program is Awards for All, which is now up to £20,000. And then some strands of lottery funding in certain areas like culture and arts go through the Arts Council. Heritage, that is buildings and premises, but also some local heritage cultural projects go through the Heritage Lottery Fund. And the big lottery fund, now the National Lottery Community Fund, as it's called, have a number of programs, including Reaching Communities, which is the biggest program, up to £500,000. And then you've got some others like Sport England have some lottery funding for sports projects. And then they have a number of others like the Community Business Fund and others, but these are subject to change. And you need to look at the lottery website. The success rates vary on Lottery Biz. On Awards for All, they're quite high. On some of the others, less so. So you need to do, again, you need to do your research on these. Company giving. This is not particularly useful for small community or organizations or charities, because as I said earlier, accessing company funding can be quite time consuming and is often not easy. And it's often only small amounts or one-off grants, or it's help in kind like free legal advice, second-hand furniture, free use of premises or rooms. I went to an event from an organization a few months ago that I was working with, who managed to get access to very good premises in the City of London for free and held an event there. So these things can be done if you seek out these contacts, but often it's who you know that will get you in with companies. And some services they provide are not in cash, as I said earlier. They're around corporate social responsibility. That is work in the community done by businesses or in communities where their business is based in some cases, and it can take the form of community projects. Sometimes they fund them, but more likely they're going to provide support to existing ones. So it may well not be in cash. Where can you get information about this? A good place to start is the one at the bottom, Business in the Community, which was set up by, well, now King Charles many years ago, and it focuses on building relationships between businesses and the non-profit making sector, but it does work with small businesses as well. Another good site to have a look at is smallbusiness.co.uk, which has a very good section on small business grants if you're a business, and that is worth checking out. And the final one is the Entrepreneur Handbook, which has 60 pages of grant funding information. It is UK wide, but that is very useful as well. The next area is crowdfunding. This is a relatively new form of community and business funding. How it works is you identify a project you'd love to see built, then people are invited to pledge funding for it. This is the non-profit method or charitable method. You're only charged if your project hits the funding goals, and with some of them you need to check the website for details, but regularly crowdfunder.co.uk don't make any charge for non-profit making organizations as long as you hit your target, whatever it is. And how it works is you put a project online and make a video, and then you invite people to fund your organization. But what you have to do is publicize the crowdfunder site, because you put information and your video and any other pictures on that site, and then people have got to get into it, click the links, and then pledge money, and the money is held by the crowdfunding platform, who will forward it to you if you reach your target. That's one type of crowdfunding. The other type, which is the more private sector based, is Dragon's Den type investment, where people can invest money in your business. If it succeeds, then they've got a share of your business, so that will be worth something to them. If your business struggles or doesn't succeed, then their investment is in jeopardy. So it is a risk. But what you should be aware of with crowdfunding as well is there are terms and conditions to it. So if somebody invests a significant sum in your business or project and it's not working out, they can potentially take it over, depending on the terms and conditions. So you need to be aware of that. That doesn't apply in the non-profit making sector. And for some businesses, the best place to start is crowdfunder.co.uk, because that's the and it supports both private and non-profit making businesses, and it's donation based. So that's where I would advise you to start on that, and follow the guidance carefully. They provide a lot of tools, but there are other sites around. Crowdcube, who I've just mentioned, are for private sector funders, and there's a couple more. The Indiegogo, which is an American site, I would recommend that for non-profits. And Kickstarter was originally creative industries, but it does cover another section. It's an American site, but these platforms are international, so you can potentially attract funding from all parts of the globe. So let's move on. Here's some other sources of information which I'd recommend for funding sources. That's the government one, Business Finance Support, which is a really excellent site. Business Hub London, which is something that's been developed by Growth London, which is a regional business support organisation. Next is a British Library. They run a lot of very useful presentations. Many of them are free, some of them are chargeable though. If you're a non-profit making company or social enterprise, then Social Enterprise UK. And then this is the final one, is for charities, Know-How, which is the National Council for Voluntary Organisations. Okay, we're going to move on now. This is just some funders of capital funding. That's buildings, premises, and equipment. That's capital funding. There are a few other things, but that's basically the main areas. The National Lottery Community Fund, the big lottery, has a premises funding strand, but that will only fund projects in certain postcodes, which are the most disadvantaged areas. And they have a capital fund of up to 500,000 plus. On the main Richer Communities programme, you can apply for up to £50,000 of capital funding on a revenue programme. That's a project based rather than premises. That's the easiest way of describing it. Garfield Weston is another one. That's charities only. Henry Smith charity, that's variable. That will fund some other organizations that are not charities. And then there's a couple of other charities there. But as you can see, if you're a private sector organization, you're going to struggle in getting money for premises unless it's part of a bigger project, because there may be sources of capital funding out there for private businesses from non-bank or other sources, but they're very few and far between. Here are some revenue funding sources very quickly. The revenue, like I just said, is for project funding, staffing costs, running costs, some equipment, software, etc., etc., computers, laptops. The awards for all, you can do that, which is a lottery funded program, and there's a couple of other charitable trusts, including the Paul Hamlin Foundation and Santander's Foundation. If you're a business, then use that link, which is very, very useful about small business grants. The Wellcome Trust I've already mentioned. Again, that will fund applications from any type of organization or even individuals in some cases. Henry Smith is for charitable sources. Innovate UK has significant funding, and they provide funding for tech projects and businesses. And My Funding Central gives a lot of information about revenue funding as well. Right, we're going to move on to the meat of this now, which is the bid writing aspects of it. This is for your initial steps. Remember, it's a bit like horse racing or playing roulette. The gap between success and failure in this area is very, very slight. So detail is important. Recently, I was working with somebody who failed to get a funding, failed to get a grant because of one word. I can't go into the details of this, but it was because of one word. So that is how tight and slight it can be in terms of failure and success. So, the detail is important. So if you've got people within your organizations or you yourself like detail and nitpicking, then this is the perfect job for you, because it's very important. The other thing you should always do is to get somebody to proofread your work. In our organization, if I write a bid, it goes through at least two of my colleagues, because sometimes they spot things that may have got through, or there's something we need to add. And also, if they understand it and they haven't read it previously, or understood the project previously, then I've done my job. If people can understand a one-off application, then straight away, then the funders should be able to do it as well. Because remember, they're often reading hundreds or thousands of applications. So, the more simple and straightforward it is, the better. Avoid using jargon. Many bids fail for two reasons, and people are often surprised about this. The first one, and believe you me, I'll show you some stats on this later, is not getting the application in on time. If you miss the deadline, that's it. They won't hold it back for you. So, and the other one is forgetting to sign it. If there's an application, many online ones now won't let the application be submitted if you don't provide either a written signature or an electronic signature. The reason for that is quite simple. You're often signing up to a set of terms and conditions to receive the money, and if you don't acknowledge that, then your application will be discarded. They won't even review it if it does get through. So those are the two. You can significantly enhance your chances by getting it in on time and making sure you sign it. And I kid you not, quite a lot of organizations that I've seen don't do that. The next thing you need to look at before you begin is to decide on your project idea. You need to have this in hand straight away. Don't just start filling in an application form. What does your project wish to achieve? who will benefit from it, who will be the beneficiaries of it, what services will you offer, and what area are you going to work with it. That could be a geographic area, or it could be providing a number of services in a specific area, or it could be in a particular sector, like the tech sector or wellbeing sector, whatever. So you need to get your ducks in a row on this before you start. Have some structure before you start developing your application. Let's just go back one. That's it. Okay. Activities. You need a description of the individual steps required to achieve the objectives of your program, whatever they are. So this is a an adult learning program, and these are the things that are going to be provided. 5 12-week courses, each comprising 1 hour individual guided learning sessions, 4 1-hour group sessions, 4 1-hour tutorials, and 4 to 6 hours open learning with access to IT facilities. So that breaks down what you're going to have to deliver. You also would need to put the length of the program. It's a year, 2 years, 6 months, whatever. And also you would need to detail the numbers of people taking part in it. There are some issues around that I can't go into today, but the basic information, sometimes people miss it out because they think that it's obvious. Well, funders can only go what you've written in your on whatever you've written on your application, so please state the obvious. The next thing you need to consider in your application are some of the key areas. So the staffing for this, who's going to deliver it, and how they're going to deliver it. Premises, are you going to use your own premises? Are you going to use other premises? If it's offsite premises, you have to hire them in some cases for workshops or whatever. Then you need to detail that, and you need to detail the costs as well. So you may have volunteers as well, so you need to detail what their role might be, or if you're a private sector company, you might have interns or apprentices. You need to detail that, and then any materials, training materials, support materials, development materials, and also your administrative support, who will be managing this. If there's any paperwork to be completed, you've got to allocate staff or volunteers to do that, and there will be a cost for that. Outputs. The inputs are the services you provide, the training, your professional skills or whatever, and the outputs are the activities, services, numbers, product, results of what you do. The detail here should be purely factual and quantitative and must relate to your objectives. So what that means is you've got to detail what you're doing. So 35 trainees will complete a level 1 course in whatever you're delivering it in. 36 weeks of training undertaken with an average attendance of 18 young people. So, that's clearly specifying what's going to be delivered and to whom. The outcomes, or it's sometimes it's more often called the impact now, the social impact. It describes the expected changes that will take place for the service users and indeed the community as well, in some cases, of the result of the services that you are going to be providing. So this is a literacy project we've been talking about. So this is qualitative and anticipated changes. So improve literacy skills amongst the target group in the target borough. So wherever it is, improve literacy skills. And then it could be something more specific: increased English skills in 90% of refugee children completing courses. But whatever your outcomes are, you've got to demonstrate the wider impact. As I say, it's often called social impact these days. But if you want to know all about that, I've got a good presentation explaining all the key aspects of it. It's on our YouTube channel. And that's proved to be one of our more popular courses. It's presentations. It's very new. Your outcomes should reflect your aims, so whatever the aims are of your project, to improve literacy or whatever, then the outcomes should reflect those, which just done. You should be able to monitor and measure them in some way, and you should be able to evaluate the outcomes of the project and use the finding to improve services. So you've got to have an evaluation method or framework. You can do that in different ways. It could be case studies, it could be a survey, but there's different ways to do this. Again, there's the presentation I do on social impact details all of the methods, so have a look at that if you're interested in that. So one of the most important things is funders, whoever they are and whatever the sector, they're not just going to take your word for it. So, because I have this discussion with a lot of charities that say we do a lot of good work, but we never seem to get much funding. And I say to them, well, you need to prove your good work. Are you demonstrating it? And often they're not doing that, so you need to get some statistical information, whether it's your own stats or from other sources. Where can you get relevant information from it regarding your organization? How can you collate it? What are the sources of information? Here are some of them. Your own business or organization subject to the Data Protection Act. For example, you can do case studies, but you've got to get the permission of the people concerned or the organizations concerned, and you can only use first names in most cases. Again, you should get advice if you're going to do that. You might have to get people to sign a disclaimer as well. Your local authority is a good source of statistical information about your local community and the need for certain services. Your integrated care services, which is your local health services provision and health hubs. In the NHS, they often provide a lot of useful information. And another very good one is the Office for National Statistics. I'm signed up to that, and they send me an email every day about all sorts of different statistics that they collect. And you can go onto their website and research on the delivery and impact of services or any other demographic information in your local area, or indeed a wider borough, region, or even nationally. Very good source of information. These are the key points to remember when submitting your application. Let's confuse those. Be prepared. Do you need to register your interest? So I talked about this earlier about a PQQ, pre-qualification questionnaire, or expression of interest. Sometimes some funders insist that you register an interest first and then you apply if they think you're suitable, because this is why they're doing it. Then they might send you the main application. But not always. Some funders, like the lottery, for example, you can just apply regardless if you're eligible, but you need to obviously check out your eligibility. You need to read the guidelines or the prospectus carefully and ensure you have suitable systems in place to manage and assess the guidelines. And you need to apply for a budget you can cope with. So if your turnover is or income in a particular year is, say, 50,000 or less, there's no point in most cases in applying for £100,000, because a lot of funders will look at your yearly income and see this is in excess of it. This is a problem for small organizations, this. So if you're a small organization or not done this before, you need to be, I would say, you need to be quite limited with your ambitions. But once you've got a track record and your income improves, then you can apply for more. Clarity, you need to explain how projects fit with funders, priorities, and target groups. Answer all parts of each section clearly. quantify any outputs clearly. You can use bullet points, that's not a problem. And make sure it's set out clearly as well. If some funders even designate the font these days, it's not usually, it's got to be 11 or above. It can't be less than 11 because some people do that to increase the number of words that they can get in an application form sometime, but you know, funders don't like that, so you need to be aware of it. Here's some good practice tips. Read the whole form before you start. Fill in the easy sections first, then at least you'll have got some of it done. Ensure all those involved with the delivery and monitoring of the project have a hand in writing the application. This is for bigger organizations. So if somebody is monitoring or managing or evaluating the project, you need to consult them about it so that monitoring will be manageable, and ensure that managers have ownership of the project. Like I said earlier, share your first draft with a colleague. Test the clarity of the aims and objectives by presenting them to colleagues. If you have answered the question fully, stop writing. You're not obliged to fill up each text box, although you should complete as much as you can, really, because if you're asked to do, say, 500 words, 400 is okay, but if you're doing 200 or less, unless there's a very good reason for that, the funders may think your response is incomplete. I'm going to show you a very quick way of building up a model application to start with. This is my 10 ideas system, which will help you build a very basic bid. So we start with 400 words target, which is not ambitious. So that's 20 sentences of 20 words each. Each idea of the 10 ideas should consist of 2 sentences of 20 words each. So you'll provide a statement about your project or services, and then you'll provide evidence to back it up. So you can start with a bullet point on this, whatever it is, and develop it into an idea. So I'm going to show you one shortly, but once you've got sentence 1, which is a statement of 20 words, then you look at sentence 2, which is the evidence from the research, from experience and signposting. So that's another 20 words. So here's an example of this. The project as another training project with childcare, provide childcare support alongside the training program. That's the bullet point, 6 words. So the sentence, we will provide creche and childcare support for students and their dependents that will run alongside the training courses. That's 19 words. And then sentence 2, previous research shows that it helps. This help needs to be available both before and after training to ensure students' full commitment. So if you've got any evidence of that as well, like a survey or some statistical information, you put that in there as an alternative. These are some other issues to consider. Equalities, social impact, cross-cutting themes, added values, and common mistakes. So equality and diversity is very important these days. And you should think it's also about equality of access as well. So you need to think about how people can access the services. So for example, if you're running a training course, is the disability access for people to get in, etc., etc., because the funders will notice this. There are 7 strands of equality, and there are a number of protected characteristics which I detailed there. And you should consider, what will the project do to promote diversity and equal opportunities? What will the project do to ensure equality of opportunity? And as I've just said, equal access to services is also important. So it's very important that you take those factors into account when developing an application. Common mistakes. There are a huge number of funding applications that are ineligible. Why? Mostly due to not reading the guidance properly. We were running a program recently, and we had a set target for the funding application. I think it was £10,000 or something. And we had several applications that were over £10,000. Well, number one, that proved they hadn't read the guidelines, and number two, it meant they were automatically disqualified because the maximum amount you could bid for was £10,000. They could have avoided that by reading the guidelines properly. So don't do a lot of work and then fall because you didn't read the guidance. Applications take a lot of time and energy, so don't waste it through carelessness. This was a program from a few years ago called Fast Forward Grants. 203 applications out of 534 were ineligible in a previous round. 137 were due to not providing the correct financial information. So that's quite important. Incomplete last annual accounts, no bank accounts details given, etc., etc. Other reasons included organizations not eligible, staff or turnover too high, their income was too high, asked for too much money, or didn't state the project actions. This was an awards for all program a few years ago. 74% of applications were ineligible. The main problems were missing information, bank account details, referees, the constitutional status of an organization, some non-profit organizations. You need at least 3 directors or management committee members, and then the contact date of birth. I'm going to give you 10 tips here for good practice in fundraising. And you can use these for reference. But there are, we could look at our YouTube channel as well. So these are my 10 top tips. It's essential that funding criteria is carefully read, because I've just given you some examples when it obviously wasn't read before deciding whether to apply. That's number one. Make sure that you think through exactly how the project will be managed and how the work will progress, because you've got to deliver it. Delivery is very important. Make sure you're clear about the funding conditions and that you're able to meet these. So say if it's to deliver the services within a year, you've got to be able to do that. If it runs over a year, they may be clawing money back. It could be some of it, it could be all of it, because some funders have the power to do that, and it's in the contractual conditions. Funders are increasingly likely to ask you what difference your service will make to people's lives. That's the impact of it, which I detailed earlier. So look at that. And it's advisable to have a credible exit or succession strategy for the project. So in other words, what happens if it's a 1-year project, say, what happens after that year? There are certain things you can do. It could continue with volunteers or interns, for example, or you could put resources online, or there was many other things that you might be able to do, but you do need to consider that. That can make a difference in an application. Make sure you answer the questions that the funder is actually asking, and answer the questions clearly, directly, and succinctly, because they'll have a scoring system on questions, and if you don't answer them, you're going to lose points. Make sure you provide any evidence which can support your application, statistical information from your previous projects, information on community need, etc. Any data, community consultation, research, or social impact evidence is very important. So collect your own data. I mean, you can get it from your local authority and the other sources I specified, but if you're collecting your own data, you can utilize that as well as ones from other sources. The financial information and budget you provide must be complete and correct. So it must add up to whatever your total is, the individual elements. And make sure the application is signed by the relevant and appropriate persons. It could be you, it could be somebody else you work with. And finally, remember, it's not necessarily the good idea which gets funding, it's the good applications. So you've got to be able to demonstrate what you do in writing, and you need to develop that skill. Next steps, start by working on short applications to build skills and confidence. If your organization does not have a track record, it will be difficult at first. Don't be a quitter, keep at it. The more applications you write, the more likely you are to succeed in the end. Try to work in partnership with others whenever possible. If you can be part of a bigger bid with a bigger organization with experienced bid writers, that's good. But one good bid could pay off. So if you want to develop these skills, it could be worth it. Okay, that's my details there, and Sybil's put them in the chat earlier. So I think that is it now. So I'm going to stop the share. Thank you. I realize I've gone through quite a lot of information there. So let's just have a look at the chat here. Yeah, that's if you want to raise your hand, I'm quite happy to take any questions. Yeah, we've shared our YouTube details. Sybil has put them in the chat, but if you go on YouTube and look for CNT Associates, you will find us there. Any questions from anybody? Alison, I'm going to pick on you. Is there anything you want to ask me? Come off mute.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yeah, fine, yeah.
Apologies, I've got a crazy comedy voice at the moment. No, no questions, just thank you very much, because that was really informative. So, you know, answered lots of questions that I had. Yeah, so thank you very much. It was really helpful.
So do you think this is a useful tool for helping you develop your applications?
Yeah, definitely, because you know, it's a case of, you know, looking out for the groups that provide funding, but also doing the research in terms of, you know, providing evidence to back up why your project is so, you know, is important. So that's really, yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. If anybody wants to contact us, then please email us. As I say, our details are in the chat. Sybil put them. Those of you who join later may not be able to access them, but the majority of people were here at the beginning. Or you can just email us. You've got our email address. It's info@cnt, Charlie Nose Tango Associates.com. If you just email us on that. As I say, our other details were in the chat at the beginning. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and we will be back in the new year. So I'd like to offer a season's greetings and a happy new year for you and your organizations. We will be back. We've got a significant program next year, and for anybody who is in London Borough and Bexley, or is a non-profit making organisation in Greenwich, we can provide free support on our business support programs, which are funded by the relevant local authorities. So please contact us about that. But you've got to be based in one of those two boroughs, I'm afraid. If you're not in those boroughs, then you need to consult your local authority website, because these programs are currently running till the end of March next year in most London boroughs. So thank you very much for joining us today. This recording will be online within the next 2 weeks, so please make use of the resource. Thank you very much for joining us today.